Hi everybody and welcome back to ONM INSIGHT. My name is Soreti Kadir and I'm your host, and today I have the pleasure of being joined by Honorable Ali Wario, a man who has had a colourful and active life in Kenya's political scene, almost up to 2 decades, and someone who has rightfully earned the title or the reputation of an avid human rights defender. Thank you so much for joining me today, Obu Ali.
Thank you very much, Soreti. Thank you for having me.
So, as I mentioned in the intro, you have been in politics for a very long time, about 19 years. You served 3 terms as a member of parliament for Tana River, and during this time you brought attention to the human rights conditions in Oromia, including addressing the issues in specific speeches in parliament. You also served as a chairperson for the Labour and Social Welfare Committee and the Regional Integration Committee. You've also been a great ally to Oromo refugee communities in Nairobi and also in other parts of Kenya. Honorable Ali, from my experience here in Kenya with settled Oromo communities, so not refugee communities, and the Orma are amongst these settled communities, there are different relationships to Oromo political identity, and I assume that this is because of different degrees of proximity to the Ethiopian state. Some communities seem to have more or less pronounced relationships to the Oromo political identity and by extension the Oromo political struggle. Tell me a little bit about what shaped your political identity as an Oromo to the degree that you have used political power for advocacy efforts, and at the same time, tell me about how these advocacy efforts were received by the Kenyan political community that you were engaging over those almost 2 decades.
Thank you very much, Soretito, for giving me this opportunity, and I want to take this opportunity again to thank ONM. I can't even count the number of times I have done interview with you guys, though I'm doing an English interview today for the first time, okay. But several times I've been here. Just for the background, I think I'm in politics for over 30 years.
Okay.
Yeah, I was a candidate in 1992, the first time, then contested 1997. I didn't succeed. I succeeded in 2002. So I won thrice and I lost 4 times. Mm-hmm. But the first time for me to join politics was 1992. Mm-hmm. That will now tell you that's almost 31 years in politics. There are many factors which bring me closer to Oromo community and articulate their issues in different forums. One, everybody has roots and everybody has history, be it good or bad, but everybody has his own history, and my history happened to be the history of Oromo community. This is a matter no accident. I don't regret to be born an Oromo. I am an Oromo. I didn't choose to be born an Oromo, but that is what I am. Mm. So when they are suffering wherever they are, when they are happy wherever they are, it's like the same body. One part of the body have a wound, the entire body will be itching. So I am part of this society, I am part of this community. My social life, I do meet Oromo community in different occurrences. I do take coffee with them. I do pray with them. I do business with them. So our interaction have been informing me of the ongoings. Mm-hmm. And based on this, I cannot bury my head in the sand and pretend there's no problem. Mm-hmm. If there is a problem, wherever, more so on human rights issues, the only platform I have as a leader is to articulate the issues, not specifically for Oromo, for any human being. When a human being is suffering, when people transgress the limits, then as a leader, where I am, I have a right to caution my government on the actions, the excesses where human rights is being abused. I have a role as a leader to bring it to the limelight of the world. Mm-hmm. So that is my obligation. And that happened to be one of the things I have done for this community.
And in that advocacy process, in that advocacy work, particularly when you have been using your government positions to do this advocacy, what has been the reaction of the Kenyan political community to the Oromo story, to the Oromo cause, perhaps even to the Ethiopian state as it relates to their oppression or ongoing violence in Oromia and other parts of Ethiopia?
Well, the Kenyan side, in fact, to a very high profile, I've been called, and some of them wanted to know more. What is the real issues? When I raised a question on the displacement of the Oromo communities who crossed to the Kenyan side, I was called by the minister then, and he inquires, where are they? How many families have crossed? What attentions? What do you want us to do for them? So it gets at different levels. Kenyan government, as long as you are acting within the four corners of the law, I had no problem with them. But there are a number of protests from the other side, misinterpreting my role as a human rights defender into Oromo chauvinism.
When you say the other side, you mean by the Ethiopian government?
Yes, yes, which was not. Mine was simply to articulate issues, human rights issues affecting a community. If it were the Tigrayans, if it were the Amharas, anybody else who is in human rights condition, I have a role to speak about it. Yes.
Absolutely. So last year you ran for the governor's seat in Tana River, and though unsuccessful, you ran one of the most comprehensive and grassroots campaigns in the area, and perhaps even in the country. What was your approach in building this campaign, and what stood out to you about the conditions that communities were facing?
Thank you very much. This is a very good question, Soreti. One, I was already in politics. One, I was already a member of parliament for 3 terms, which is 15 years. Why did I left this position? It was very easy for me to capture parliamentary seat if I intended to contest as a member of parliament. But the suffering of my people on matters education, matters health, availability of water, poverty reduction, land ownership, on these issues, there are very big gap affecting the Oromo community in my county. As a member of parliament, my role is to articulate, is to represent them, is to make laws, okay? In terms of resource distribution, in terms of fixing and solving the problem facing them in matters education, matters land ownership, matters health, your role will be very minimal. So I don't want to be in a position where I'll be earning millions in salary, but that millions will not translate into solving the problem facing the people. So I said, I don't want to run. I mean, my intention is not to earn a salary. My intention is to solve the suffering of my people. That is why I decided to run for the governorship. Tana River is very unique. Tana River is 38,000 square kilometers. It is thrice the size of Rwanda.
Wow.
So in terms of logistics, moving voters from this end to that other end, or you visiting them from one constituency to the other, we had like 370 polling stations.
Wow.
And for you to make an impact, you must be in each and every polling station. So I mobilized the women group, I mobilized the youth group, I mobilized the elders, community interest. We have the farmer community in Tana River, we have the fishermen community, we have the hunter-gatherers, we have the pastoralists. So you have to really connect with all these people. Connecting with them means moving from one end to the other. That is 38,000 square kilometers, almost 300 kilometers across Tana River. It is one of the most expensive campaigns I have ever in my political career done. Luckily, in terms of articulating issues affecting our people, no candidate has ever matched the level of what we put forward. I'm glad to say this. So why did I lost? Mobilizing for 38,000 square kilometers requires 100+ million shillings. My history is very clear. my records, the 30 years I was in politics, I have no single scam. Not single scam. I didn't have a single audit query in the CDF resources we have been using. I had lived a very clean political life. So the resources I had, compared to what was required for me to run through for the 2-3 months of campaigning, the resources I had was not enough to sustain the vigor of my campaign to the conclusion.
It's so evident when you speak about your community and when you speak about your efforts that you are deeply passionate about this work.
That's true.
And that politics is really a medium and a means for you to affect change in your community. And that's, I think, something to really be highlighted and commended, because we know that politics for many people, not just in this country, not just on this continent, but around the world, what they call career politics, right? It's an opportunity to progress up a ladder. It's an opportunity to, acquire a lot of money. The way that you're describing could have happened and was not the case for you. So it's just very inspiring to see leadership that is integrity-based and integrity-based, and also that focuses on issues that people are really facing. And one of those issues that you have been engaging for a very long time is the issue of female genital mutilation, also known as FGM. Yeah, you've been taking a vocal stance on this issue in the community, and this is not necessarily common for men or for women. What has compelled you over the years to advocate for the eradication of this practice? And I really want you to answer this question as well. How do communities respond when you come out and you say, no, this is wrong and it shouldn't be happening?
Two things. One, I was the chair of Labor and Social Welfare in at the National Assembly. The Department of Gender, we used to oversight the Department of Gender in the Ministry of Public Service. In the Department of Gender, there is a board, an FGM board, under the Department of Gender. We had interactions. I had professionals speak about this. Going back, I am a father of many girls, lovely girls. What I've had from the professionals, that it doesn't end with the act of FGM alone. It will affect her throughout her life. As a father, I have to say something about it. I don't want to bury my head in the sand and pretend there's no problem. There is a problem. Though the challenges is bigger than what people think, than what people see. This thing is deeply rooted in cultures. I mean, it has been, we have law in place, it's illegal, but how many people, are you going to arrest the whole village? Because the entire village around supports the act. So it really needs a lot of awareness, it really needs a lot of sensitization, it really needs a lot of resources for us to send message across to those cultures, to those communities, that this thing is not a religious act. It isn't, as many are trying to propagate. It isn't a religious act. The suffering, the impact of FGM is too big on a human life. It's throughout her life. So the quicker we stop this, the better for all of us. That is why at one point, it was threatening my political career. But again, I opted to go for the best way. What do? I have to speak against it. Everybody in the community was scared, and my advisors were telling me, don't go into FGM. But I took the risk. I took the risk. I spoke up against it, and I will speak against it even today. If that will stop me from becoming a leader, well and good. But the number of people suffering, the millions outside there, their voice must be heard. The world must know they are suffering. We can't bury our head. We can't keep quiet about this. Women are suffering with FGM, and we must do something to stop it.
Really powerfully spoken, and I think that your stance or your reputation or the way that the community receives you, not just as a political leader, but also as a grassroots leader, also as a religious leader, as a religious figure, right, or someone who practices this religion as part of their day-to-day life, I think that this message coming from you will have impact if it has not already had a great impact on communities, because I know it's not easy work to sensitize communities beyond.
That is what I believe too, and I have been using many forums, including this one, to articulate against FGM. People are suffering. Our girls are suffering. We must speak against it, and we must act now, not tomorrow.
One of the other issues that I got a chance, Honourable Ali, to learn about when you were campaigning for the Tana River governor seat is the political dynamic between pastoralists and farmer communities in Tana River. But also this dynamic is present in other parts of Kenya as well, namely northern Kenya. Now this dynamic can also be thought of as a political dynamic between settled agriculturalists and those whose livelihoods are centred around a nomadic lifestyle. Can you describe what causes conflict between these two communities and how the Kenyan state and its policy priorities affect this conflict?
Well, Soretito, I have to do an overview of some laws and policies for you to understand the background. In land ownership, for example, in Kenya, the policy is very clear that we only have town planning and agriculture as if it comes to matters land ownership. Pastoralism, despite the fact that 80% of our land mass falls under pastoralism, is not clearly recognized the way farming and town planning is recognized. So in areas where there is conflict between the farming community and the pastoralist community, the law clearly stands with the farming community. Unless and until we do something about this and we review that specific areas of law, the pastoralist will be disadvantaged. Looking at the educational system, up to very recent, from policy perspective, the law says if the presence of government is minimal, the church must take over educational institutions. What will happen to those who did not accept Jesus Christ as God? Some of us, we are Muslims. So the law must bring on board all actors. In livestock trade, the Veterinary Act is very clear. I come from a very harsh environmental condition. We do move livestock at night because during the day, the stress is high, moving livestock from producer area to the market area. During the day, in that climatical condition, it will affect the livestock and it will affect the prices. So people move. There is law in place which will not allow us move our livestock at night. The funniest part of it all is when you bring your livestock to the market, if you sell it or not, the life of that animal must be ended there. You are not allowed to carry that animal back home because it will affect other animals. So there is no fair trade. These are the factors in law, marginalization, institutionalized to affect the pastoralist people. Look at the education system. Look at the national examination. Here is a kid or a child whose environmental condition is affected by the climate, whose life is affected by the climatic condition he lives in. If the parents are moving in search of pasture and water, the kid will alternate between his way of life and the education. Now that there is no one to leave the kid to, because the parents are moving in search of water and pasture, the kid will be forced to drop out of school and follow their parents. At the end of the year, that kid will sit the same examination with other students, other children from the nation. So if I will speak for the kid, the plight of the pastoralist kid, is this educational system the current educational system, is it meant for a pastoralist child? And my answer is no. So there are many policy gray areas which affect the pastoralist communities. This is one. Why the conflict between farmers and the pastoralist? I will use the example of Tana River. We have irrigational schemes. We have national game parks. A number of government projects. We have Galana Kulalu, which have taken 1 million acres of the pastoralist land. So the concentration on pastoralist is along the river, where the farmers are also growing. Because their land have been taken by KWS, their land have been taken by NIB, their land have been taken by ADC. Their original traditional grazing areas have been taken over. So the concentration now, the pastoralists are forced to concentrate along the river, and that is why most of the time there are conflicts between the farmers and the pastoralist communities.
And this land is vulnerable for this kind of extraction, or just being
Indeed,
able to
yes.
be robbed because of the lack of institutional policy to protect pastoralists as landowners.
Indeed, yes.
I'm curious to know if you think that there is a relationship between this lack of effort in policy making and protection for pastoralist communities and the way that the Kenyan government has not responded to the crisis in the north of Kenya, the famine and the drought. Because it's not just yesterday that this drought came about, it's been in the works for years. Do you think that there is any relationship in terms of, them being erased from these political conversations because they are largely a pastoralist community, or is there no relationship between the two?
There is a big relationship, Senator. At the eve of independence, Lechko, from the floor of the House, where I used to represent my people too, the then governor, Sir Charles Elliott, says he cannot convince Her Majesty's government because the economic return from northern Kenya is very minimal compared to other areas. So he can't convince Her Majesty to invest in northern areas. Then come the Kenyatta government. They came with sessional paper number 10 of 1965. This sessional paper drew the country into two portions, a portion of high potential areas and low potential areas. With the expectation that you invest in high potential areas, the coffee growing areas, the tea growing areas, and then the resource you get out of that will later be plowed back into the low potential areas. That policy have left us in marginalization for ages. The only solution maybe is through Article 204 of our Constitution, which envisages the creation of a fund, a specific fund, to pull up those areas, to come at par with the other, and of course, having the county government in place with the kind of resources, maybe it will address the marginalization. But in Kenya, marginalization of northern areas was institutionalized. So there's a big link, and luckily, we now have a remedy in terms of Section 204, creation of equalization fund. The intention was to pull up the areas which were lagging behind in terms of development and other issues. That is one. And two, having county governments, giving them equal share of resources that will address the marginalization which we have been facing for ages. But what you said is very right. There is very close connection between the marginalization of northern Kenya and the policies they are using.
Obo Ali, I really thank you for your time today and for this really insightful and multifaceted discussion, and I look forward to hopefully having a discussion with you again in the future.
Thank you. Maybe there's one thing I forgot. Why am I close to Oromos? For those who read the Abrahamic religion, be Christian, be Muslims, you know the history of Abraham. Was persecuted and was forced to leave his land. So at one point, Abraham alayhi salam was a refugee. You know the history of Musa? Musa was given prophethood when he was away from his land. You know the history of Jesus Christ. He also left his hometown. You know the history of Muhammad, who migrated from Mecca to Medina. So in this religious book, most of these prominent people, at one point, they were refugees. They have left their hometown. They have left their home country. So what if today, suppose I was with Muhammad, may peace be upon him, I was with Abraham or Musa, and I don't give them attention. So this is why I love refugees. This is why I work with them. This is why I'm closer to them. I hope the world will understand me.
I think that's such a brilliant point, because often you see collusion between the state and religious institutions of many religions in a way that does not work to the benefit of the most at-risk people in society. So to see that your faith informs and inspires your dedication to human rights defending and your dedication to empowering the lives of refugees and other marginalized people, I think is really inspiring. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you everybody for tuning in to that rich and insightful and multifaceted discussion where I learned a lot, and I certainly hope that you did as well. My name is Sariti Kadia. You are watching OMN Insight, and I look forward to seeing you next time.